Less than 1% of players are using these cards, but we think they're going to help you win games.
I'm Mia, and I like texting more than making phone calls.
I'm Beezy. I take my Coke without ice, please. And we're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. They're our new sponsor. We love them, and we're thinking, go to Card Kingdom, use our link in the description, because that tells them that we sent you. And you can use Card Kingdom for a variety of reasons, including
buying cards, selling cards, and soon you're going to be able to check out our favorites all in one convenient page. So check out our link and check through it through like the month and stuff, because there's going to be some updates really soon.
And we're sponsored by Dragon Shield. They got the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
Get your sleeves from the source. Buy your sleeves, support the channel, spend no extra money, and in fact, when you use code
NERDS
at checkout, you save 5%. Also, Moxfield, somewhere in the video, we'll get to it later. But we got to start with cards that are just so underplayed. These cards, you might not have even heard of them. They are in less than 1% of decks on EDH Rec. In some cases, 1%, but in almost all cases, they are in 0%, according to EDH Rec. And we think they're actually going to help you win games, so we are recommending playing them more.
There are so few people who play these, so you can stand out and also get some utility out of them. The first one is Staff of the Storyteller in 1% of decks, 12,600 decks on EDH Rec. 1 and a white for an artifact. When it ETBs, you create a 1/1 spirit, and whenever you create 1 or more creature tokens, you put a story counter on it. You pay white and tap it and remove a story counter on it. You could draw a card. I know that white has a lot of trouble drawing cards, especially in token-based decks. You have a couple cards like Welcoming Vampire and such, but I think this is a really good one to also supplement that card draw.
Yeah, this is a very specifically token payoff. It makes tokens, it does the thing you want to do. And I just want to point out that I wanted to start with this one because it is the most popular card on our list by a mile, and it's only in 12,600 decks. So it's only going to get like more obscure, especially when we go to the next one. But yeah, I like the fact that this makes tokens. It's weird. Legacy got a hold of this card for a second because the card just feeds into itself. Every line it triggers the next line. So it's a very efficient card. It really just does everything by itself. And as long as you're making 1 token a turn, this is kind of like an Idol of Oblivion. You got to pay 1 mana into it, but that's a lot better than some of the cards like, I'm just going to throw out a few, like the Dawn of Hope, where you got to pay 2 mana every time you gain life to draw a card. The 2 is like, I found to be too expensive, but 1 is like much more affordable. Endless Atlas is the same way, where it's like, I don't want to spend all that. Maze Mind Tome, another one. I just don't want to do that.
I like the fact that this comes down really quickly too, because it's really easy. It's really hard to get that early game advantage sometimes in white, because you can make a lot of bodies, but after that, sometimes you just kind of like sputter out and go, okay, now what? But now that you're making those bodies, you can just get further advantage when you are playing those late game plays to keep your hand full.
Yeah, plus this comes with a body attached. It gives you a separate entity that you can chump block or attack or do whatever with. And I just think this card is sweet. A little bit of synergy we're going to go in. Obviously, this goes in token decks. Every token deck probably loves this card, especially white weenie type styles. It is card draw. So if your commander makes tokens, you don't need a ton of other stuff going on. This always replaces itself. So it's always like a weird inspired overseer kind of effect. And then if your commander makes tokens, that's gravy. But a card I really like with this one is Teleportation Circle. You don't need anything. If you're just a flicker deck that can flicker artifacts, you can Teleportation Circle and flicker the staff to just draw a new card and get a new spirit every time.
That is really good. I also like the cards that say like tap 2 creatures, create a little creature, or it's just like having it stapled on like another type of artifact, tap it, create a 1/1. That could be really good because if you have enough of those, or if you have stuff that will untap things, you could do that on every player's turn and then just get maximum value out of this.
But now it's time to get a little bit more obscure. The next card on our list is an oldie. This is Spelltithe Enforcer in 0% of decks. That equates to 7,600 decks playing this card. It is 3 white for a 3/3. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player sacrifices a permanent unless they pay 1 mana. So we've heard of Rhystic Study. You've heard of don't pay the 1 or pay the 1. This is like, no, you're going to pay the 1 or you're going to lose tangible board presence. This is a very interesting tax piece, and I wanted to keep this on the list because despite Hate Bears being mildly unfun, there is no question that hundreds of thousands of people, they're still playing them. They're in playgroups where that's okay, or they're not bothered by it, which is totally fine. But I would like to submit this one for consideration.
I think that this isn't played as much considering there is kind of a taboo in Commander about like making people sacrifice permanents. That's why Annihilator is one of those things that people really don't like playing against or will like Rule 0 ban in certain groups. However, this one I think is really brutal because casting spells, especially something, against people like Beezy, who are just chaining spells left and right, you'd be sacking so many.
Yeah, and it really forces them to pay attacks, and it's a very interesting choice. Like, do I want to sacrifice my creature token? Can I afford to tap out if I sacrifice a land for a big spell? It really incentivizes them to pay the one, which just slows them down. And it doesn't work for you. It's not symmetrical, so you just get to play all your spells as normal. I think this has a lot of potential homes, especially in like the Hate Bear style decks where you're playing a bunch of disruptive creatures. I don't think this card is like scoop up my cards and leave the pod unfun at all. I think it's just a pretty annoying little card. I mean, all my opponent's cards are going to be annoying in some sense. So you're going to see this alongside like Aura of Silence, where now their artifacts and enchantments cost 2 more, and if they want to play one, they're going to have to sacrifice a permanent or just take another extra mana for it.
Another one is it's like Chancellor of the Annex, which I run in my CEDH deck, which has been completely brutal because you can reveal it at the beginning to counter their first spell unless an opponent pays 1 extra, or if it's just on the field, they also have to pay 1 extra or the spell gets countered. I'm surprised you don't have this in your like Ojutai I am being annoying deck.
It's definitely a card that I'm like looking at now and considering. Honestly, I forgot this card existed, but now that I've seen it, I want to get into a deck because the tax is real on this thing.
I mean, it's fully on board, and that's the whole theme. Like, hey, did you read my card?
That's exactly how I sound. What's the next card?
The next card is Occult Epiphany in 0% of decks or 6,600 decks on EDH Rec. X and a blue for an instant. You draw X cards, discard X cards, and create a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying for each card among types discarded this way. You can get a lot of card filtering this way, considering you can be looking at a ton of cards, especially if you're doing this, holding up all your mana, pretending that, oh, I have like a bunch of counter spells, and then at end of turn going, oh, tap 7 mana, draw 7, discard 7, get a ton of creature tokens if you have enough types among the cards you discarded.
I mean, you can't get 0, right? You're always going to discard cards that have card types. So you're probably going to get at least 3 if you draw 4 or 5 and you have control over what you discard, so you can always choose to make a lot of tokens. This card I think is amazing. It is played so well for me in many different environments, but no one plays this card. Everybody forgot about it or something. It's only in 6,600 decks. Instant speed token making is pretty huge to the point where people are playing Midnight Haunting. People are playing that card. It's 2 and a white, make 2 spirits with and it's an instant. This card is like blows that card out of the water because if you just staple it over and you say, all right, well, I'll pay 2 and a blue. You get to draw 2, discard 2, and still make 2 spirits. And if you discard like an artifact creature and an enchantment, then you get 3, even though you only discarded 2 cards. It's pretty sick. I think this card has a lot of homes in any deck that is like playing Talrans or Vadrix, that kind of thing. Riel absolutely goes ham over this card because you're going to draw X, discard X, and then because of Riel, draw X again. And there's even like Toulouse. Toulouse says when you discard, they go under her, and you're going to see them later. This is now card advantage and all this stuff. And Oscar's the same way.
I really, really like this, considering it is a lot of filtering. And I feel like we need as much information as we can get. I think it's very threatening to keep up a bunch of mana as a blue player in general. And people might think you have the counterspell or a Psych Rift or something like that, but instead you could just make chump blockers too. Yeah. I think that's like a very nice piece to have in your arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, people are not going to expect the blue deck to make like 4 chump blockers for 5 mana. That's not a thing that I'm going to put you on with this. Maybe bounce all creatures or something, but if that hasn't happened and I think you don't have that, I'm going to be confused when you go draw a bunch of cards, discard a bunch of cards, maybe cast a Madness card off of it, trigger my commander, something or other, make 4 spirits, block, and then untap and do something crazy. Up next is a card some people believe to belong to the Prismari school in Strixhaven. They are very wrong. It's Primaris Eliminator in 0% of decks. This is 6,500 decks from the Warhammer 40k precons. There were so many cool cards in that set that you probably missed this one. It's 4 and a black for a 3/2 ETB. Choose one. Destroy target creature, or creatures target player controls get -2/-2 until end of turn. So this is like a Shriekmaw effect with no restriction and no evoke option. But the other thing you get is board control, like crowd control. You can take out a bunch of creatures at once.
I think that this is definitely one of those cards that got glossed over when we were all being like, ooh, Blood of the Blood God is really, really good. But this has been really, really impactful in every game that you've played it in, and you have it in at least 1 or 2 decks.
I have it in multiple decks. I've got it in a mono black deck. I've got it in a graveyard deck. It's just good. You can blink it, you can recur it, you can reanimate it. Really anything you're going to do with a Ravenous Chupacabra or a Shriekmaw, you can do with this. And in some cases, it's better. I know Henzie decks. If you've got a Henzie deck, this card slaps in that. You're going to reduce the cost, blitz it out, finish off whatever creatures you need to do. And then if you wipe out a bunch of small creatures, that might open up a huge attack. Normally, destroy one creature might not crack the board open for you, but this gives you the whole other option to snipe all the tokens off the board.
I also really like the fact that it is target player. So if you do have a lot of tokens, you can still run this in your deck because it's not a full board wipe as a lot of other creatures might be. And then also you can kind of make bargains if there are 2 players with a lot of tokens. You can kind of see which one will like leave you alone for a turn and then go after the other one and then wipe their board so you have some clean attacks on them too.
Yeah, what you really get with Primaris Illuminator is versatility. There's no board state where this card is bad unless your opponents have no creatures, in which case I'm probably ecstatic about this.
I really would be too. I'm really excited to see this, and I'd love to see this in more decks.
Gotta get these numbers
it's been
up.
So good. Another one in here is Seasoned Pyromancer in 0% of decks, 5,800 decks. 1 red for a 2/2. When it ETBs, you discard 2, then draw 2. For each non-land discard this way, you create a 1/1 elemental token. And if you pay 3 red and exile it from your graveyard, you create 2 1/1 red elementals. I really like this because of the ordering of the card. It's discard 2, then draw 2. So if you have an empty hand, you just draw 2 when this enters, and that's amazing.
So this card, I was actually astounded that it was in 5,800 decks. There are so many reasons that this card is awesome, and I love it. And it was a modern card for a minute, so I figured eyes were going to be on this card too, and people were going to just say, oh, it's pretty good there. I'll slot it into my deck because I have synergies with it. But nobody did that. So if you're just like, forgot about Seasoned Pyromancer or you're not playing it, I think there's a few decks you want it in. It's also only $5 now, so price isn't even really a factor anymore. This card is very good filtering. It gets cards from your hand to your graveyard and then replaces them. Like Mia said, if you played in the late game or you run out your entire hand, then this just starts drawing cards in red, which is literally unheard of. Red cannot do that. Red cannot draw cards. So this has the potential to do something red literally cannot do. The only thing is that if you've got like let's say 3 really good cards in your hand and a Seasoned Pyromancer, you might hold off on it because you don't want to discard the really good cards. But I think in general, if you're playing Tormenting Voice, Faithless Looting, or all these types of Cathartic Reunion even, play Seasoned Pyromancer, or take out one of those cards, which I don't think are very good, for Seasoned Pyromancer.
This is an early drop too, so it's not like you're losing out on a ton because Faithless Looting is only 1 mana, you know? You just wait a little bit longer and you can get way more effect out of this, especially since you have something to do later in the game if it's just sitting in your graveyard, and you need a couple chump blockers or anything at instant speed too, which is super nice.
And we're not even factoring in, we haven't even mentioned yet, that this thing just gives you up to 2 creatures when you play it, so you get 3 bodies for 3 mana and filter your cards, or possibly go up cards. Going up cards means you won't get as many tokens, but that's a fine trade-off. This card does everything. Alesha decks, you play it, you discard your best creatures to reanimate with Alesha, and then if this thing dies, you can bring it back with Alesha. It's like perfect for them. But clearly this is seeing play in almost no decks anywhere because 5,800 is such a small number that I bet even most Alesha decks aren't playing this.
I'm actually really surprised to see it at $5. Last time I looked at it, I felt like it was over 10.
It caught a reprint somewhere.
Yeah, so I'm just really happy to see that it can be the versatility of it can be very high and it's still being a reasonable price point for most decks.
It's got that effectiveness in Reanimator. It's a bunch of tokens for very cheap mana. You can throw it in token decks and have a great time. Madness decks, Chainer can use this to discard the creatures that it wants gone, then discard other cards to get those creatures back and just continue the value train. Madness cards work super well with this. They really just, there's nothing Seasoned Pyromancer can't do pretty well, so I was stunned it's only in 5,800. It's in less decks than everything we just mentioned. Less decks than Spell-Typed Enforcer.
But if you like free stuff and having a great time with us, come hang out on our Whatnot stream during Murders of Karlov Manor, the pre-release weekend. We're so excited. We had a great time during the Ravnica Remastered. We gave away an entire collector booster box of packs, and we built an entire deck to give away on stream. We're doing that for Murders of Karlov Manor too. But along with collector boosters and a deck from the box, we are giving away all 4 precons too for free to you.
Yeah, just show up, And come hang out with us. We're doing polls. We're doing a bunch of fun little mini games. It's going to be great. We're giving away stuff. We're selling stuff on like our Whatnot profile that you can buy that's signed from us. It's going to be amazing. Mia, when is that?
Our stream is going to be February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click on our link below, tell them that we sent you, and if you click on the link and sign up, you get $15 free to spend on whatever you want at whatnot.com.
That's a lot of whatnot.com stuff. Croson Restorer, that's our next card, baby. 0% of decks. Again, 6,100 decks total. This is a 2 and a green for a 1/2. It taps to untap target land, but if you have 7 cards in your graveyard, you can tap it to untap 3 target lands. That's actually sweet. I've played this card in non-budget and budget alike, and it kind of sort of slaps. Untapping lands is a real deal. The main thing you're going to compare this with is like Wild Growth. Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl, very playable cards. And when you have cards like Croson Restorer in your deck, now you start cutting the Nature's Lures and the Sky Shroud claims for like Overgrowth and Fertile Ground, Wolf Willow Haven even. So now all of these dorks are untapping your lands, which aren't going to really be interacted with, and you're generating like billions of mana.
I am not surprised that you've already played this in multiple decks, considering it is a graveyard-based card. However, this is really good. There are other mana dorks that say like tap for 3 mana, but you can only use it on like creature spells and such like that. But this is untap 3 target lands, and with those enchantments stacked on them, that can net you what, 6+ mana if you have the correct lands and enchantments?
Yeah, Voyaging Satyr, it's 2 mana, 1/2. It's the same thing as this card, but it's only untap 1 land and it's 2 mana. This card is only 1 mana more than that. I think that's a completely fair rate in the early game. I'm fine paying it. It's not the most thrilling, but it's completely passable. It's going to help you develop. And then in the late game, oh my god, untap 3 land starts to get really wild, especially if you've got certain commanders or creatures out. Like if you have a Shaya out, perhaps, this card becomes a combo machine because it'll be a land. You can tap it to untap itself and 2 other lands, which will now give you infinite mana of any color.
I also really like this because you can untap lands that are not just mana producers too. You can target like War Room or something if you need more card draw or something else like that, and you could just keep getting value based on what you untap.
Yes, and this has other combo potential, late game critical mass combo type stuff where you assemble enough of the right cards, and now your ramp spell is going to help you win. There's a lot of equipment and cards that say like double the abilities of a creature, but you can't target mana abilities. You can't double that. Untapping lands is not a mana ability, but it still generates mana. So if you can start copying and untapping creatures and stuff, throw in like a Seeker of Skybreak, and you start untapping all your stuff and continuously doing it, you're infinite. This card is great.
The next card is actually one that I run in a deck, and a lot of people probably miss because it's in Unfinity. However, it's completely legal in Commander. It's Paradise Lost in 3,500 decks, or 0%.
That's low. That's even for this list, that's low.
That is incredibly low, and I think a lot of Unfinity cards that are legal do fall under that type of category. It's 3 green for an instant. You roll 2 6-sided dice, then return any number of cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to your hand, where X is the result of the dice you rolled. Now, this is really good in like landfall decks if you have a lot of fetches, for instance, because you could get back all of the lands that went to your graveyard. This could get back those couple like very good value pieces that might have died early on. One of your big haymakers, because the average of 2 6-sided dice is, you're going to be having like 6 bare minimum, and if you can get 12 out of it, that would be sick. But even 2 gets you back a couple like value creatures and then every single land you have in your graveyard.
There's actually a couple things to break down with this card. It doesn't look like it says this, but even if you were to roll 2 6-sided dice and somehow roll a 0, you still get every land in your graveyard because they have total mana value 0. So that is the baseline. You get all your lands back guaranteed. So if you might be thinking, this spell looks pretty high variance, I don't think it's going to work for me. If you always remember that the floor is get all your lands back to your hand, something like Borborygmos Enraged is looking at this card and going, oh yeah, no, I just want that, like for sure. This card's amazing. Who cares what else it does? Sometimes it's Eternal Witness. Great. It'll always give me back something else small. I want my lands. That's really great. And another thing is, we had talked about another Unfinity card, and a lot of people had said like, Unfinity's not legal. Unfinity's not real in Commander. They're not real cards.
Only kind of true.
Interesting, but I am here to let's set the record straight. They are black bordered Commander legal Magic cards that Wizards of the Coast printed that we are allowed to play with. I don't know how to unpack that anymore. This is a playable card. It is legal in the format. It's hard to prove outside of everyone saying it's legal.
Yeah, You definitely have to look for the acorn at the bottom to make sure whether it's legal or not.
Acorn says not legal.
Acorn is not legal. And I do know there are weird ones. We have talked about exchange of words prior, and that's a very weird one to wrap your head around. However, Paradise Lost, even though it is in Unfinity, it has some of the same mechanics as D&D cards, rolling dice and then just getting stuff back.
It's not too far out there.
That's just like a D&D card. I play this in Vrondis because Vrondis really cares about you rolling dice to make tokens, but I also just happen to get anything back in my graveyard that matches the dice roll. That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and there's plenty of decks out there that have really low mana value things, like a bunch of mana dorks, the elves that are very cheap. This, on a 6, if a 6 roll gets you 3 lands and 3 cards back, that's really good card advantage. This card does a lot of things, and I think that it's worth a second look for a lot of people. Next, we get to move on to a gold card. This is Callous Assassin in 1% of decks. It is an 8,300 decks. It's 4 blue-black for a 3/3 flash. You can have it enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except when it enters, you destroy another creature with the same name as it. This has a lot of things going on for it. First of all, it's an ETB, so if you flicker it and you want to cheat it into play in some way, you still get the trigger. This functions a lot like 6 mana mind control. You get the creature off their board, and now all of a sudden you have the creature, and if it has an ETB, you get it.
That's so nasty. I love the fact that it does have flash in it. Plus, people love playing ETB stealing type effects anyways. That's why Fairy Artisans plays a lot. Our editor really loves Aboleth Spawn.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy the fact that this is a type of deal where it's you get it, they kill the thing, and then as you mentioned, blinking it can get super nasty. There's so many good ETBs nowadays in Commander. There's going to be at least something on the board that you would also like off the board and that you would really like to have yourself.
And the best part is even if you're ahead, right? I'm playing an Amanatu Blink deck, and I flash this down, and my best creature, I have the best creature in play. I'm going to copy it still and not destroy it. You don't even have to. You can choose 0 other target creatures with the same name as this creature, and they won't die. So it lets you leverage a winning board position, catch up from behind if you're facing down some kind of scary threat by also removing the threat and then giving it to you. It really does a lot. I mean, even in something like a Tivit deck, Tivit's got a great ETB. He's just a good commander in blue-black with a good ETB. You throw cards like this in your deck, and all of a sudden, you can just dominate people.
I love the wording on this card, too, because it enters as a copy of a creature, so targeting the creature doesn't matter, but then the target is in the destroy effect when it lands already. I think that's very interesting.
Just because they don't have to know what you want to copy when it's on the stack?
Yeah, because it's copying, but then if they snipe their own creature or sack it or something,
doesn't mess you up.
Yeah, because you can just pick something else. I really, really like that wording of this card.
Yeah, throw it in a Sephiroth deck where you already want big Esprit enters the battlefield reanimation targets. This is a reanimation target in and of itself. Or if you've already got one out, it copies it and you don't have to destroy your own stuff. Or obviously the sick mode of just play Noxious Gearhulk with Flash. The only downside of this card is that if you copy something, which you will, it enters tapped, so you can't block with it. But I think that's okay. That's a fair trade-off.
I think it's fine too for 6 mana and then destroying the thing it copies. That's pretty good.
Clones are 4 mana already, and destroying is usually at least 2. So this feels like a very fair deal when you give it all Flash. And you know what else has Flash? Moxfield.com ads, because they come in the middle of the video and you don't even see them coming, like with this one. We think that Moxfield's actually the best way to build a deck on the internet. So if you were to go to Moxfield, follow the Nitpicking Nerds account, and then start building decks, you would find very quickly that this is the place you want to be. This is home.
Moxfield has lightning fast ads in our videos, and if you want to look at any decks that we mentioned, like my Vrondis deck, like BZ's Ojutai deck, then you can actually see it on our account, Nitpicking Nerds on Moxfield.
Please follow us. We would love it. We would appreciate that. But we're also going to appreciate telling you the next card that's super obscure. Mia, what is it?
It is Dueling Grounds in 1% of decks or 4,700 decks. 1 green and a white for an enchantment. No more than 1 creature can attack each combat. No more than 1 creature can block each combat. This was one of the cards that our friend put into your 100-card Carador deck.
That's what made me even realize it existed.
But I think this is incredibly interesting considering it's really good for the Voltron type decks. Mm-hmm. And just it completely shuts down the big token type decks too.
Yeah, you're trying to go wide? I don't care. I hope you have 1 good creature, because otherwise your Saproling is not of any concern to me. I was looking up green-white commanders that have menace because another thing about this card is that if only one creature can attack and block, you attack with a menace creature, it's unblockable. Some of the ones that came up, Onyxia is that enchantress lady. She's got menace, so if you want to pump her up with like auras and stuff, totally valid to just kill somebody with that. Plus, Dueling Grounds is an enchantment, so she can get it back as a creature that has the same effect. Vishgraz is another really weird one that this might actually be something you consider. Vishgraz comes along with some tokens, but he's got menace, and he's huge if your opponents are poisoned. So you can totally commander damage people out.
I can also see this really shining in a type of like deck that just has a lot of trample in it. Like not even just
Yeah, same thing, evasion.
Yeah, because at that point, if you can only block with one thing, oh, you kill your 6/6 thing with my 6/6 thing. Well, here's +3/+3 trample. Just a bunch bleeds over. You couldn't block with anything more, anyways.
Yeah, I know this kind of feels like a Nambo, but like Galta and Maverin, it's going to attack. It can create other tokens, which we'll get to in a second. But mainly, it's just a 12/12 with trample. How are you supposed to block that? But that brings us to the other way to secretly attack with more than one creature with this card is to play something like Geared. Geared makes a Rhino when he enters, but when he attacks, you populate and the token enters tapped and attacking. And there's tons of cards like that where they attack and give you something tapped and attacking. That still satisfies Dueling Grounds. Dueling Grounds is like, sure, that's fine. You know, he was looking the other way and they still snuck him past. The rules still see that as totally valid. So you can overwhelm people. They can only block one of them.
If they're not declared as attackers, you're good to go. So I really like that tech.
Yeah, Tillinelli Summoner is another one. If you're like in that sort of Naya tokens, you pay X in a red and get X 1/1s. If they are pumped at all, you're killing people because they just can't. They can only block one dude.
Now this one, I even forgot that this existed, and I played a bit of Limited in this format. It is Junkyard Genius in 0% X or 1,200 total. That
Barely
is
anything.
So few. 1 black-red for a 2/2. When it ETBs, you create a tap Power Stone, and if you play 1 black and a red and sack another creature or artifact, like the Power Stone, until end of turn, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain Menace and Haste. That can really be a powerful effect if you have a large board, or if they're pumped creatures for 3 mana and then like a dirtly little artifact.
This does a lot of things. I'm not saying this card is broken or that this card should be in high power artifact decks, but there is so much on this uncommon dude to talk about. Like, it is 2 permanents for 3 mana, so it gives you a Power Stone and it enters, so you can sacrifice it and or the Power Stone for value in your like Mardu or red-black artifact / sacrifice deck. So it gives you fodder. It is a sack outlet in and of itself that is repeatable. And this is also like sort of a C level win condition. If you have a bunch of creatures and you untap with this, you can just go sack, +3/+0 menace, attack with everything, and actually get through a lot of damage. This is so weird. Even in an artifact deck where you just, let's say you have like 45 artifacts, you really focused on it, and this is one of your non-artifacts, that Power Stone is basically rampant growth for you. So this thing just does a little bit of everything. It's kind of surprising that it's only in 1,200.
I also think the haste will kind of matter too, because I feel like a lot of these Rakdos type artifacts, they're making a lot of little like Thopters and little things in the air. So when you give those haste, you could really kill someone pretty fast for 3 mana only once, and then if you keep pumping it, you can hit for a lot.
You can fire off like a Living Death, return this. Now it's in play. Give all your creatures +1/+0 haste and just jam. Like, wow. I mean, Junkyard Genius, there's a lot going on. Jan Jansen's probably one of the decks that it's the best in, because Jan Jansen has infinite stupid artifacts to sack, and he can make infinite little 1/1s to pump and give menace to.
Marionette Master is also a great card with this, considering you will have to sack artifacts with his effect. But when you have Marionette Master pumped up, he will be dealing so much damage based on each artifact that you sack. And if you're making Power Stones, or that's like the theme of your deck, or treasures or something, that adds up.
This is a sweet card. If you're looking for more sweet cards, I gotta say, we've got them here. The most worth buying cards of January are just a click away.